and everything that we've learned about the Common Core and what's going on in quite frankly, both consortia, Smarter Balanced as well, to guide that. Those items were piloted with our students, so the exemplars come from our students. We have struggled to get exemplars for the top ranges of those score points on the rubrics because our students are not used to working with these open-ended items. So that has been a struggle. The other really important point is that the preponderance of these items are DOKs of 3 and 4. In both of our contracts for both the formative item bank and the benchmark, we said no DOKs of 1. We got those covered. We don't need any more. So there will still be some 2s, but we wanted the preponderance to be DOKs of 3s and 4s. And we need to remind people not to confuse DOK with difficulty. Okay, they're not the same thing. DOK has to do with the cognitive process, the cognitive demand. It may not necessarily make it difficult. If I asked, a group of 5th graders to spell onomatopoeia, that would be a very difficult item. But it's spelling, it's rote, it's a DOK of 1. So remind folks, and quite frankly, I fall into that trap also. I tend to forget that DOK and difficulty are not synonymous. Okay, so 700 plus items were loaded last year, and an additional 900 are going to be loaded this fall for use in classrooms. They align to our content standards, and again, we're trying to build items where we knew Park was going to build assessments as well, so you'll see that we've done 3 grades at the high school, or 3 courses at the high school, because Park is intending to have 3 assessments at the high school, 9th, 10th, and 11th. The items are sometimes aligned, particularly if they're open-ended, to multiple standards. And so you have that information as well. We did not move solely away from multiple choice. There's nothing wrong with multiple choice. But we did want to focus the development mainly on constructed response because we saw this as the critical need for our state. So we have extended response and scaffold items. We're asking the students to show their work and provide their rationales, and they are really struggling with that. They're not used to that. They are not used to that. They sometimes will show their work, but writing out why they did what they did or providing evidence from text in the ELA courses, they really struggle with. And again, that's really a great way to look inside a kid's brain, if you will, and see what their level of understanding is. So the extended response items can assess multiple standards and multiple domains. They're really integrated items, if you will. They can allow for multiple correct answers, right? Because a student may solve a problem any number of ways or may cite any number of evidence, but as long as their rationale for what they've done is sound, that's okay. They're not just choosing from one of 4 responses. And they're scored with the rubrics and the exemplars that are out there on the OAS for you. So here's an example of an extended response item on the that's in our bank. So the students read a passage, the Denver Express, and then they're asked what theme and they're given an excerpt from the passage, what theme does this excerpt convey about the American West? And then they're asked to write a response identifying a theme about the American West portrayed in the passage, and then analyze it and then use evidence from text. And that's a real key concept because the Common Core expects students to write in response to text. That is different how our current writing assessments are structured. With Park, we will derive both reading and writing from the same student response. So through the student doing something like this, we're going to get a level of their comprehension of the passage from the evidence they cite, from the inferences that they make, and then we're also going to look at their writing skill to make sure that they're using conventions appropriately, that they're writing for the audience in an appropriate manner, that whatever the audience is, and the audience will be told, whether they're writing a letter or what have you. We've also embedded scaffold items, and those are items that kind of build on top of each other. So it's a series of items, if you will, that's tied to a task, if you will, and build. They can be multi-strand, multi-domain, and they're designed to really start out rather simple and then build up for deeper understanding. So here's an example of a scaffold item that's in the item bank for grade 3. They're given a graph that shows the number of jars of peanut butter and jelly that have been collected for the food bank. They're asked a very simple question to begin with, record the number of jars of peanut butter and the number of jars of jelly the students collected, label your answers. Then in part B, they're told that each jar of peanut butter costs $3, each jar of jelly costs $2. Altogether, how much did the jars of peanut butter and jelly cost? Show your work. This is what they're not doing. They're not showing their work. They're writing down the number. Okay, and then it goes further on, and again, you see how it's expanding on what the student's doing, and I can't read it. So you plan to buy more jars of peanut butter and jelly, and it gives them some directions. They're going to buy at least 1 jar of peanut butter and at least 1 jar of jelly. What combination could they get? Show their work, provide an explanation. And then they're asked to graph what they are going to do. So you see how it's scaffolded and it builds on each other. And it goes for a deeper level of understanding. And so what the kids are not doing is several things. What's going to be important, and this is a ticky-tacky thing, and it won't cost anything, but they're not labeling their answers. And it needs to be labeled. I mean, the scores, any score at any testing company is going to search for that student answer and is going to give the kid credit. So it doesn't have to be labeled part A, part B, but it's helpful if they do. It's helpful if it's organized. But they're going to search. They're not going to penalize the kid for that. It is not true that if it's sloppy work, they don't get credit. Those people can read all kinds of things because they see all kinds of things. And the point is to give the credit to the student for what they did right, not penalize students. So they really spend quite a bit of time and effort in trying to decipher. But it's helpful as students label and explain, and that's what we're seeing that they're not doing. They're writing down the answer, 2.5, and moving on. And I don't know whether that's an unintended consequence of us living in multiple choice land for so long, where everything is, a definitive answer or not. I don't know. So the exemplar papers are there. There's a prototype answer. That's the ideal answer that's modeled. This is what we're looking for. And then there are sets of exemplars from actual student work in the state of Georgia. And this is what teachers can use if they don't have time to score the papers themselves. They can do this as an activity within their classroom. And engage students in that. You actually could have the students work on the problem one night for homework, and then the second night they go back, they take the exemplars, and they work through and they score their own, and they talk about the strengths and weaknesses of their own work as the second night. So again, even though this is done in kind of a formal assessment perspective, that footnote says is when you're doing formatively, you need to throw out that you need. I don't want to say you need to throw out. That's not right. But you need to free yourself out of that box and allow yourself to use it informally. We don't have to always, clear your desk, get out your number 2 pencils. Again, assessment is not an event, it's a process. So here's an example of a math item. That's about clear as mud, isn't it? With the rubric. And I can't even read it, so this was a really good example. But it's a 4-point or 3-point part item. And here you see the prototype answer is typed out, right? That's the prototype answer that we're looking for. Below or next to it, you see an actual student work, and this was 3 points out of the 4-point rubric. And you can see how nicely the student labeled his or her work. But what this student did, why it's not 4 points, is they were asked to write a rationale for what they did, and they didn't write that rationale. So that's why they lost a point there. And then you see, and I'm sorry, this PowerPoint will be posted so you can actually take a look at these. And I apologize, I'm doing exactly what you're not supposed to do, and it's really working well because I can't even read it. So there's an anchor of 2 and 1 again to start seeing. And I'm really glad to see that anchor of 1, it actually shows some student work. Because we've had students literally write, and I really need to find examples because people don't believe me, that what they write is, I don't know what to do. Okay, so what are the valuable features? Again, we've tried to find high quality passages that reflect the expectations in the curriculum. So there is more of a preponderance of informational text because that's a stress when it's appropriate. Doesn't mean that there's not literacy. There are paired passages because that's an expectation within the curriculum as well, that students compare and contrast and derive evidence from multiple pieces of text. So we have those. We have looked at the lexile of these items, and you know with the Common Core there are lexile bands to encourage the reading so that students exit our school reading at a level that they will be successful, whether it's for future training in a career or for post-secondary work. And we've actually looked at the lexile levels on our own tests, particularly at the high school level, making sure that our passages and our expectations prepare students to be successful, and there's some good information there, and we do achieve that. And so again, integration of the reading content and writing, so reading and writing, and that's very different, and we need to have conversations with teachers about that integration, about deriving how well students have comprehended from their writing. Mathematics. We have an intentional focus on both the content of mathematics as well as on the process skills that are inherent on the continuum. And that is not as heavy a lift for Georgia as it is in other states, because ever since we've implemented the GPS, we've embedded those process skills with content. And every item on the CRCT for years has been aligned to both content standard as well as a process standard. So it did raise the reading demands of our math test, and that's something that we've heard people express concern about. But it is because those problems, to get at those process skills, they have to be situational based. And so it does demand a little bit more reading. We do work hard to keep that reading at a level so that it doesn't interfere, because that would be unintended information, irrelevant interference with what we're trying to measure. So we do work with educators to make sure that we're not, if it's a 10th grade item, that the vocabulary is on a lower grade level and not something that's going to throw the kids for a loop. Okay, so let's talk about the findings of the results. This is from the spring 2012. We are in the process of scoring the ones from February and really finalizing that, so we'll share those data with you as soon as we have them available as well. But the overall shortfalls was students were not organized in their response. Again, the neatness doesn't detract, but it does help. Please hear me say that. It does help. Many times they didn't seem to understand what the question was asking. They didn't follow the directions. They didn't answer all parts of the question. So they would answer one or two parts of the questions and then move on. And they didn't label their work with the appropriate units, those types of things that we expect. Here are the results. This is for the English Language Arts. I have shared these results before, but again, I'm anxious to see the phase 2 pilot, and hopefully we've made some improvements. The concerning thing, this is a 4-point rubric. Look at the percentages that got scores of 0 or 1. That will not be proficient when we move. And that is where we have the majority of our kids responding. They are not citing evidence from text. They're not elaborating. They're just answering the question and moving on. So they need practice, not skill and drill. Okay, I'm not suggesting that, but they need exposure. They need to know what the expectations are, and we've built some resources to help with that. Where we need to see them are in the upper score points of 3 and 4, and you can see where we are. About 10% in grades 11, 12. Okay, mathematics, even worse. Look at the percent that got 0. And here, they got a point if at least they computationally computed the correct answer. They didn't show their work, but if they didn't even at least get the computation right, they got 0 points. Now look at the number that got 0 points. So you see, we can't, and I know there's a lot, what, are we going with Park or are we not going with Park? We got to act as if. We have to act as if, because whatever we do, it's going to be different. And there are going to be open-ended items. And these data are alarming. So we got to act as if. The test will take care of itself if we get instruction right. And we will get instruction right. I mean, that's the one thing that's so great about our state. We're nothing if not resilient, and we improve steadily and consistently. Okay, so lots of great information on our website. And one of the things that we did to help students prepare for these types of items is we did some student checklists. So you see one of the links there is a checklist, student checklist for ELA, student checklist for math. So that's a resource that you can use with students as they're responding on those types of items to make sure that they're doing the things that they need to do to be successful. Now, obviously, they're not going to be able to have these during the summative assessment, but while we're using them formatively and while we're getting them used to these types of items, it's appropriate to use these. So please do avail yourself to these types of resources and use them. And again, you don't have to go all or nothing. Multiple choice is not going away. Please don't hear me say that. But we need our students to really be prepared to work with open-ended items. So let's talk about benchmarks. In benchmarks, we're building interim assessments, an interim assessment for grades 1 through 11 in English Language Arts. So that's something that we heard from across the state too, with the demise or the postponement or whatever you want to call of grades 1 and 2. The lack of funding for grades 1 and 2, we heard that, hey, we can't wait for grade 3 at a high stakes grade where there's promotion and retention tied to find out where students are. We need a resource in grades 1 and 2, so we prioritize that. That will be field tested this fall, and we will make those available to you in January. So there will be benchmarks for English Language Arts and mathematics in grades 1 and 2. So in mathematics, the same thing, grades 1 through 8, and then coordinate algebra, analytic geometry, advanced algebra. We also prioritize U.S. history and biology. Now, for science and social studies, we're building not necessarily benchmarks, but we're building additional items to go into the online assessment system for use in the classroom in grades 3 through 8. So here's the differences between the formative and the formative. We have, or excuse me, this is not the difference. That's another slide, but this is phase 1. So what are we going to do in August and September? What are we piloting? We prioritized English Language Arts because that's a need that we heard, was that we needed to know where we were with English Language Arts with the increased text demand to make sure there's high quality resource. So you see that the prioritized grades that will be piloted this fall, grades 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 10. And that would be 10th grade lit, which really is the standard. It doesn't matter whether you are teaching the formal 10th grade lit course or world literature, the standards are the same. So this is more of a survey course, so students can use this benchmark. And then in mathematics, we're doing grades 1, 2, and 3 in coordinate algebra, and then U.S. history. So that's for the fall. Now, if I am in 7th grade, in the fall of 2013, what grade level benchmark am I going to take? Yay, thank you. And that's really important that we make sure that the right kids get the right level, right? Okay, and it'll be labeled as such. Okay, then